Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Our first one isn't just a story about barking dogs or bad neighbors. It's about what happens when someone spends years making life miserable for everyone around them, only to discover that the rules they ignored can be used against them just as effectively. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. He leaves his dachshunds outside to bark all day. Now a mysterious ringing sound keeps him out of his pool. I have a crappy neighbor with a crappy girlfriend who moved into our small, tight-knit neighborhood about 5 years ago. You know the kind of place I mean. People wave, borrow tools, keep an eye on each other's houses when someone's out of town. We had a good thing going. Then he showed up. The girlfriend's about 20 years younger than him, and honestly, she's fine. Not my favorite person, but polite enough, keeps to herself. Him, though, absolute nightmare from day one. Within the first few months of them moving in, their dogs started getting loose. Not once or twice, constantly. These weren't small, friendly dogs either. They were aggressive, poorly trained, and absolutely fearless. I watched more than one neighbor sprint back into their house to avoid getting cornered. On 2 separate occasions, their dogs dug under my fence and attacked my dogs. Thankfully, mine were okay, shaken but not injured. That could have ended very differently. Trying to talk to this man is pointless. He's one of those people who can't accept responsibility for anything. Nothing's ever his fault, ever. If something goes wrong, it's because someone else provoked him, misunderstood him, or conspired against him. This is the core pathology. A person who believes the world exists to inconvenience them will see any boundary, a leash law, a noise complaint as a personal attack, justifying endless retaliation. At one point, a realtor reported him for leaving his boat parked at his house, which apparently violated some city rule. Instead of dealing with that like an adult, he decided to take it out on the entire neighborhood. He started calling the city on everyone for the dumbest possible things. Trash can slightly visible, reported. Grass half an inch too tall, reported. It became very clear very quickly that he was the kind of person who believes if he's inconvenienced, everyone else deserves to be miserable too. Then came the dachshunds. Now, I actually have a dachshund myself. I love the breed, but I'm not delusional about them. They're stubborn, vocal, and dramatic. That's just the breed. But with training and consistency, they can absolutely be taught boundaries. My dog knows that barking inside is fine. Things move outside, I get it, but outside barking is a no-go. And on the rare occasion he forgets himself, we have a backup e-collar to reinforce the training. My neighbor? Nope. He decided to start breeding dachshunds, multiple dachshunds, and instead of keeping them inside, supervising them, or doing literally anything responsible, he just leaves them outside. All day. Every day. When he's at work. When they go out to dinner. When they're gone for hours. And the dogs bark nonstop. Not occasional barking, not a few minutes here and there, continuous, frantic, echoing barking. I have a 3-hour-long recording of it. 3 hours without a single meaningful pause. I called animal control multiple times. Their response, they have shade and water. That's it. Apparently that's the bar. Mental stimulation, noise disturbance, quality of life for everyone around them, not their problem. We tried the polite route. We asked him calmly if they could please not leave the dogs outside barking all day. His response was basically to tell us to go F ourselves. Okay then. Now, here's where things get interesting. They have a pool that's built very close to my fence line, and for years I've overheard them complaining about my old crepe myrtle tree. That tree's been there longer than their pool, longer than them. It provides shade for my dogs, my chickens, my hanging plants, and it's a favorite resting spot for visiting birds. I'm not removing it for anyone. But if they hate one crepe myrtle, we added another. Right along the fence line, we planted an additional crepe myrtle and a row of clumping bamboo in between. And before anyone panics, this is clumping bamboo, not running bamboo. I did my research. It's manageable, non-invasive, and we installed a proper rhizome barrier. This wasn't some impulsive scorched earth decision. It was planned. On a branch of that crepe myrtle they despise so much, we mounted a small Bluetooth speaker, and that speaker plays a lovely high-pitched ringing sound, not loud enough to violate any noise ordinances, just loud enough to be deeply, profoundly unpleasant when you're trying to relax by a pool. This is the genius of the play. You didn't break a single law. You weaponized aesthetics and minor, unactionable nuisance, meeting his chaotic pettiness with cold, precise calculation. It's a perfectly legal siege. They haven't been able to use their pool in 3 weeks. They're furious. I can hear them complaining. But here's the best part. They can't call the cops or the city because when they put up their fence, they didn't get a permit. And they know, absolutely know, that the second they involve the city, I'll report it. So now we're at a standoff. Their dogs bark all day? Fine. The ringing plays. The neighborhood's quieter than it's been in years, at least on my side of the fence. And for the first time since they moved in, they're the ones being inconvenienced by someone else's choices. The ultimate irony? His entire worldview is based on asymmetrical warfare. He inconveniences others and they have no recourse. You flip the script by finding the one thing he values, his pool, and exploiting his own hidden vulnerability, the permit. Now he's trapped in the exact dynamic he created. And our next story. They tried to destroy my tenant's life. I destroyed their business instead. So I own a handful of residential properties. It started as a side hustle, then grew into a decent little portfolio. For years, I handled everything myself, the midnight toilet overflows, the screening calls, the lease signings. But then my main business, a niche retail operation, really took off and demanded my full attention. I couldn't be on the hook for a busted water heater at 2 a.m. anymore. It was time to outsource the landlord headaches. Enter what I call crappy property management, or SPM. On paper, they were perfect. Local, family-owned, been in business for 15 years. The owner gave me a firm handshake and talked about relationships over transactions. Their office was clean, their brochures professional. They promised the full white glove service, marketing, 24/7 maintenance coordination, tenant screening, evictions, the works. For a reasonable 8% of collected rent, they'd handle all the crap. I could just sit back and watch the deposits hit. I signed on, relieved. The foundational mistake? You weren't just hiring a service, you were handing over unilateral power to act in your name. That handshake wasn't for partnership, it was for plausible deniability, theirs. At the time, most of my units were between tenants, but I had a few occupied. The crown jewel was a higher-end 2-bedroom condo in a great, quiet complex. And living there was my favorite tenant ever, let's call him Frank. I'd screened Frank myself before hiring SPM, single guy, software engineer, quiet, meticulous. For 3 years, he'd been a dream. Rent hit my account on the first like clockwork. He once replaced a faulty garbage disposal himself and just sent me the receipt. When a patio screen door came off its track, he fixed it over a weekend. No complaints, no drama. We'd even become friendly, texting about football because he'd expressed interest in buying the condo someday. He was the kind of tenant who makes being a landlord actually feel sustainable. This is your canary in the coal mine. A perfect tenant isn't just income. He's a buffer against risk and a barometer for your management's integrity. Any system that threatens him is fundamentally broken. He landed a new, even better job in February. Everything was back on track, or so I thought. Here's where SPM's incompetence turned malicious. For March's rent, Frank dropped off a physical check at SPM's office on the 1st, as he always did. Unbeknownst to him, a miscalculation with his new payroll timing and an automatic car payment caused a temporary overdraft. His bank honored the rent check, letting it clear initially, but then a day later, when the car payment tried to post, the account went negative. The bank reversed the rent check. This is a common banking snafu. It happens. The key is communication and a reasonable process. SPM, however, operated on a system of breathtaking laziness. They didn't deposit Frank's check for a full week after receiving it. Then, after it was returned by the bank, they waited another week until around March 22nd to even notify him. So we're now 3 weeks into March, and April's rent is due in just over a week when Frank gets a call from SPM's accounting department telling him his check bounced. Naturally, he's blindsided and scrambles. Coming up with a full month's rent plus the next month's rent with only a week's notice is a tall order for anyone, even with a new job. He called them apologetic, explaining the bank error and that he had a family member willing to loan him the money, but it would take 3 days to transfer. SPM's response wasn't just unprofessional, it was predatory. The woman in accounting, a nightmare I'd soon get to know personally, told him he had 24 hours to bring in a cashier's check or money order for the full amount, or they would file a worthless check complaint with the state attorney's office. In our state, a worthless check over a certain amount is a felony with potential prison time. This wasn't a standard eviction notice for non-payment. This was a direct threat of criminal prosecution over what was, at its core, a civil landlord-tenant debt issue. Frank pleaded. He explained the delay, the loan, his perfect 3-year history. The accountant's tone was icy. You committed a felony. This is our policy, and we are required to report it. You have until close of business tomorrow. The switch from civil to criminal threat isn't an overreaction. It's a business model. They create a crisis through delay, then offer their own brutal fee-justifying solution. It's a protection racket with a corporate letterhead. Now, I know landlord-tenant law. I made it my business to know. The lease stipulated a return check fee, which was fine. The legal remedy for unpaid rent, bounce check or otherwise, is to start the formal eviction process. That process begins with a notice to quit or pay or vacate notice, which gives the tenant a legally mandated period, in our state 3 days, to cure the deficiency before any court filing. It's designed precisely to avoid this kind of nuclear escalation over a simple debt. SPM was skipping every step of due process and going straight to threatening a life-altering criminal charge. And I knew none of this. SPM's next call to me was a masterclass in deception. My new representative chirped, "Just letting you know, your tenant in the Maple Street condo, Frank, has given notice that he'll be vacating at the end of his lease. We'll start marketing it next week." I was surprised and a little disappointed. I called Frank to wish him well. "Hey man, heard you're moving out. Everything okay? Did you find a place to buy?" The relief in his voice at hearing from me was immediately palpable, followed by a flood of stress. You don't know?" he asked. Then he told me everything. The bounce check, the 24-hour ultimatum, the felony threat. He was utterly defeated. "I can't have a felony," he said, his voice hollow. "I'm in tech. I'd never work again. I told them I'd forfeit my security deposit to cover what I owe, and I'm moving back in with my parents to get straight." I saw red. I was also confused and hurt. "Frank, why didn't you call me the second this happened? They said it was out of your hands, that it was their policy and you'd authorized it. I didn't want to drag you into it." The most corrosive lie. They weaponized your good name to isolate him. By claiming you endorsed their extortion, they turned his trust in you into the very reason he suffered in silence. It's administrative betrayal. That's when my fury found its focus. SPM had used my name to isolate and intimidate my tenant. I called my SPM contact, my voice tight but controlled. I was immediately transferred to the accounting department. "This is about Frank at the Maple Street condo," I began. "I just learned about this bounce check situation. This is a tenant with a flawless 3-year history. Why are we threatening him with felony prosecution instead of following the eviction process?" The woman on the phone, let's call her Linda, the legal eagle, had a voice that could curdle milk. "A worthless check is a felony. He committed a felony. This is our company policy. I'm sorry." "It's not a worthless check in the criminal intent sense. It was a bank error," I argued, my distress turning to anger. "The legal path is a 3-day notice to cure the unpaid rent. He has someone wiring him funds in 3 days. Just follow the law." She repeated herself slowly as if to a toddler. "It doesn't matter. The check bounced. It's a felony. It's our policy and we will prosecute if he doesn't pay by tomorrow." "Let me make something very clear," I said, my voice dropping low. "What you're describing sounds like extortion. If you file a criminal charge against my tenant over this, you will have a catastrophic problem with me. I'm not losing the best tenant I've ever had over your insane policy." "Don't curse at me," she snapped, her faux professionalism cracking. "I will not be cursed at. We're filing the charges if there's no payment tomorrow." The line went dead after I offered a few more choice explicitives. The waiting game began. True to his word, Frank arranged to move out, assuming forfeiting his $1,800 security deposit would settle the debt with SPM. He was broken by the whole experience. Then in April, my rental statement from SPM arrived. They had deducted the missing March rent from my payment. Let me repeat that. They clawed back the money from me. So Frank thought he was settling his debt with them via the deposit, but they had already taken the loss out of my pocket. I was now out $2,200 and SPM was holding Frank's deposit. I emailed demanding they apply Frank's security deposit to cover the lost rent they'd already charged me for. Their email reply was a monument to audacity. The security deposit is the tenant's money held in trust. We must return it to him unless we have a court judgment for damages. We will recover your loss from the restitution ordered in the criminal case. They'd filed the felony charge. After everything, after I'd explicitly forbade it, they'd done it. And they were now telling me in writing that they were using the criminal justice system as their personal collections agency. I played dumb, replying, just to refresh my memory, can you outline the steps taken here? I want to understand the process. And like villains in a movie explaining their plan, they did. They sent a detailed email timeline. Check bounced, 24-hour notice given, tenant failed to pay, felony complaint filed with the state attorney. They cited their policy like it was scripture. I had them. I had a written confession of their extortionate scheme. I drove to their office unannounced. Linda, the legal eagle, was at the front desk. I need to speak with the owner, now. If this is about the situation with Frank, she said, smugness dripping from every word, you're not seeing him. I leaned on her desk. Then you can tell him he's about to lose every property I manage. I'm terminating our contracts effectively immediately. I need the keys and files for my portfolios. The smugness vanished, replaced by panic. Her eyes widened. You can't just... The owner, a sweaty, nervous man named Rick, appeared and ushered me into a conference room. He desperately tried to backtrack, offering to waive fees to personally handle my account. I laid out the facts. Their actions were unethical, likely illegal, and had already cost me a perfect tenant and a month's rent. My demand was simple. Drop the criminal charge against Frank immediately. He wrung his hands. My hands are tied. It's company policy. The state's attorney has it now. He doesn't owe you money, Rick. He owes me, and I'm choosing to eat the loss. Drop the charge. He refused, so I took my keys and left. But the fight wasn't over. Frank was still facing a felony. I went home and started digging. A search of our county civil court records revealed SPM had been sued before. A large apartment complex had taken them to court for gross negligence and breach of contract, something about failing to perform required inspections leading to massive city fines. SPM had lost and been ordered to pay over $20,000. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. I called my real estate attorney, the one who'd helped me with my first property purchase. I showed him the email chain, explained the felony threat, the clawback of rent, the whole sordid mess. He stroked his chin and smiled. This isn't just breach of contract, he said. This is tortious interference, potential extortion, and a flagrant violation of fair debt collection practices. We can go after their license. We sued. We also filed a formal complaint with the State Board of Realtors and the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. My lawyer, being brilliant, requested a specific judge for our case, the same judge who had presided over the previous lawsuit against SPM. The day in court was poetic. Judge Henderson looked over his glasses as Rick took the stand. Mr. Rick, the judge said, his voice dry as dust, we seem to have a recurring acquaintance. Explain to me why your company thought threatening a felony was an appropriate substitute for a 3-day notice. Rick stammered about policy and protecting owner interests. My attorney then entered the email chain into evidence, highlighting the part where SPM admitted to filing the charge specifically to secure restitution for a civil debt. He called Frank to the stand, who testified to the terror and humiliation of the experience. He then entered the record of the previous judgment against SPM. The judge's ruling was a symphony of justice. He found SPM liable for intentional infliction of emotional distress on Frank, tortious interference with my tenant relationship, violation of state Landlord-Tenant Act procedures, engaging in extortionate collection practices. The orders came down like hammer blows. The worthless check charge against Frank was dismissed with prejudice, $15,000 in damages to Frank for emotional distress and legal fees, $10,000 to me for lost rent, damages, and attorney fees, an $8,000 court fine. A referral to the state attorney for a criminal investigation into extortion. Most crucially, a revocation of SPM's real estate license and a recommendation to the DBPR to suspend their business license. SPM was finished, obliterated. Within months, their office was vacant, a for lease sign hanging in the window posted by a different, reputable management company. Frank used part of his settlement as a down payment and bought a house. We still grab a beer every few months. I sold off several of my properties, simplifying my life. For the ones I kept, I hired a talented, salaried individual property manager, a person, not a faceless, policy-enforcing corporation. The poetic justice is in the specificity. The system, when correctly engaged, can act with surgical precision. They weaponized the law. The law, in turn, dismantled them piece by piece, licensing and all. The policy was their scaffold. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.